Greetings, family, kings and queens, princes and princesses. I greet you here at Kimbunga Media. This is Sankofa Speaks, the first session in the Messiah season, starting off fittingly in the Messiah season. We are born in this month because we want to draw on the warrior queens and the warrior queen ancestors, their spiritual power, their spiritual intuition. This is a very powerful month in the African calendar. And I felt it was right that we start here, especially as the foundation of this work begins with organizing. So we wanted to draw on that strong spiritual energy, the sense of pride as African women who organize for the needs of themselves, their families and their community and the African world, the Africans all around the world. In this time, we are at war, and our best line of defense is a space where we can reflect, where we can grow and reflect on our personal growth and social development with just straight, plain talking. So with that said, I am your host at Sankofa Speaks. My name is Sankofa. I'm a mother. I'm an African woman. I'm an African woman first. I'm a mother. I'm a complement to a king. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm an auntie, an activist, facilitator, and many other things. But mainly as well, I'm an organizer. So this is how this show has been born. For those who are not familiar with the term Sankofa, Sankofa comes from the Akan people of Ghana. And I'm just going to read quickly what Sankofa means, because I think it's very important and it's the essence also of this show. Sankofa, more time, is represented with the bird looking back. It says, Sankofa is a constant reminder that our past experience must be a guide for our future. Learn from or build on the past. Sankofa means to go back to the past in order to build for the future, or we should not forget our past when moving ahead. We should learn from this past, that is, to go back and fetch. Go back and fetch what we need and move forward into the future. So that is the foundation of Sankofa Speaks. And we are going back to what our ancestors, the foundations our ancestors have laid, the knowledge that they have had, the wisdom that they have put down, and building upon that. And with that, I have my first guest to open up my show, a warrior queen, an elder in our community, a staunch organizer, a Garveyite. She's going to speak to who she is herself, because my introduction will never do her justice. But I came on Liberation Road. I'm in my 40s now, so I came when I was in my mid-20s, and she was, a stapled diet on Liberation Road. She's an author. She's been part of many, many initiatives, campaigns, creating organizations, and whenever she's been in the system, she's fighting for African people also. I'm going to let her break down her own journey, because I don't want to spoil anything, but we have here with us who I call Mama, Auntie, Nzinga, Assata. Welcome to Sankofa Speaks.
Thank you for inviting me, Sister Nahanda. It's a privilege to be here.
I'm very, very grateful to have you. So, like I said, I wanted to have you here as my first guest, as I think intergenerationally it's important, but also, we need that kind of foundation conversation when it comes to organizing and knowing what that journey looks like. And you've done fantastic works in regards to documenting a lot of the work of the women of the Garvey movement, and being able to see ourselves as women of the Garvey movement, regardless of what period of time we're in. And I think that you're able to speak to the fact that not only know what work is necessary to continue, but why is so important to organize, and how that has impacted yourself as an organizer and as an African woman, but also how you've seen the changes over the years.
Yes, very true. No, that's very true indeed. And much has been done, and a great legacy has been left by mass of the women in the Garvey movement. And in addition, many other women such as Ida B. Wells, the anti-lynching campaigner, who often spoke at the Garvey meetings in Harlem. There's if we look at our history, women have been organizing from way back until contemporary times. So it's important for us to bring them to life and share their work with our community and our children and our grandchildren. Now, as you've said, I'm actually an elder. I'm 73 years old now. I'm a mother, a grandmother, and I'm also now a great-grandmother of a 15-month-old.
Very rich.
Indeed, little Micah. He's going to be a real champion in the community. And yes, so basically I started off as Mary. I'm going to give you my name that I've changed to become Nzinga, Assata. I started off, was born in Jamaica in 1951, March 1951, came to England in January 19. Well, I didn't come, my parents sent for me at age 7+ and came to this country in January 1959. So I've had most of my education and information in this country, and obviously grew with a lot of the overt racism and dysfunctional behavior from the society. I mean, when we came here, you could be chased down the street with people calling you wog, nigger, blackie, all sorts of people. I'm sure most people, if you've in touch with your history, will know some of this dysfunctional legacy that these people, put out there. And unfortunately, are still putting out there. You would think by now they would know better, but clearly that's not the case. So I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in social science. I'm not registered now because of being retired, but I'm a trained nurse, what you call an SRN, registered nurse, a health visitor. So I used to visit families with children and give advice and direction as to care and management of children, nutrition, etc., etc. I'm also trained to teach health visitor students and support them through the process of practical work to qualify, etc. I have 2 children, Nicolette and Warren, and they have between them 6 children. And Nicolette's daughter, Aisha, who's a psychotherapist, has produced this wonderful great-grandson that I've spoken about. So, and I've been quite involved in helping to nurture him. And I think that that's something that we're losing as a collective of people. I mean, the whole society is losing it because of things like the internet and all of these, YouTube and blah. People don't want to leave their homes to visit family and so on. So all of those links are being broken before our eyes. And we are party to it without recognizing the dysfunctionality that it's actually creating in the society. So those are some of the things that we as a people will have to tackle. Now, as you've said, I'm the author of my first book is called In Praise of Our Ancestors, and it's just a collection of poetry and presentations that I've made at political meetings. And then during the 1987, I was the treasurer and fundraising coordinator for the Marcus Garvey Centenary Committee. And that was when I actually learned that there were women in the Garvey movement, because prior to that, no disrespect to Marcus Garvey, because he's such a giant.
Yeah.
Scholars and other writers talked about it as if there was only Garvey.
Yeah.
Yet this was an organization of over 6 million members with branches across the world. Half of that membership were women.
Yeah.
Which is something that I learned, and I was asked to do a presentation by the Pan-African Congress movement on women in the Garvey movement. So it was in the process of researching and collecting that information that I learned about the massive contribution of a diverse range of women in that movement, which we'll talk a little bit about some of them as we go along. Yes.
Give thanks. So where would you say, how did you, when did you answer the call then, let's say, in terms of becoming an organizer, an activist, and recognizing your role and responsibility in that way then?
Okay. I've always been quite active in community in terms of when my children were small. I was the chairperson for the Parent Teachers Association and also the treasurer. I would assist with the fundraising at the schools and also became a parent governor, etc., etc. I think if your children are in school, it's really important that you're keeping an eye on what is going on there, and you're also making a contribution, a presence as an African person, because often if young people don't see their families and their people from their communities doing the things that we talk about need doing, they're not going to have that start in life, if you like. You're the example that the children are going to model their behavior after. So I think was a good contributor.
I do say I try to, when speaking to parents, a lot of the time, that's a major thing. I think wherever we are, we must have presence, especially when our people are in vulnerable places. So whether it's school, hospitals, wherever, where our people are vulnerable, there has to be some kind of presence.
I totally
parents might say to you, but I've got to work. It's difficult. I don't have the time for no parents, PTA or school trips.
Well, I was a full-time health visitor, full-time health visitor manager at some points in my life, it's about making time. Time doesn't just come and say, oh, look, here I am. It's about you looking at all of your priorities, because yes, it is hard. Do we even need all of the work that we're doing, some of us? Do we need all of these gadgets that we have to have and that we have to give our children now? We have to prioritize the things that are really, really important. And we as a people in this day and age, we really need to be focusing on what's happening to our children. Every morning since the weekend I woke up, one of our children or some child has been stabbed. Just this morning, there was a 15-year-old in, I think, is it Hackney?
Yeah.
Then yesterday, there was another one somewhere else. And over the weekend, there was another one. No, we have to look now at what our priorities really are. One of the things that the women in the Garvey movement did was to focus on the nurturing, especially the Black Cross nurses, focus on the nurturing of children, giving education, health education programs, nutritional programs, etc.
We get to that.
Indeed. I'm just saying that to show that, you can't just leave up everything. It's not going to happen by magic. We have to organize and plan around these things. So coming back, during the 1980s was when I moved away from Parent Teachers Association work and joined the Association of Black Social Workers and Allied Professionals. We used to meet in Brixton. This was a combination of many of the health service professionals, social work professionals, daycare professionals, and so on. And the aim of the organization was to prevent the government from taking black children into care and then fostering and adopting them out into communities where there weren't black people. So these children were growing up hostile to themselves and their communities. And when they came back to their families, they were scratching their skin off and putting bleach on themselves to try. So the work we did in 1983, I joined them in 1981, 82. But in 1983, we actually did a document called Submission to the Social Services Health Committee in government to stop placing black children in white families. And that led to the creation of an organization called the New Black Families Unit at Gresham Road in Brixton, where the thrust to recruit black families to care for black children actually began its existence.
Wow. And that's some powerful work, and I have heard of that work and the building of that, but unfortunately I've heard a lot has been done to take all of that away.
Absolutely. Indeed.
I suppose that's back to what I'm saying. What it doesn't, you speak as if to say you're just doing. You're just doing. What was is there? Because some people say, "Oh, but I don't know what I could do." How do you know you can? Or
well, to be honest, I didn't know. I mean, I knew there were problems in terms of hostile racist behavior towards black people, but I actually didn't know, because at the time I was married. I didn't know that people were organizing in the community. Somebody invited me to the association's meeting, and the rest is history. I became there was 4 of us as members of the fundraising group. You had different committees for different things. So I was a member of the fundraising group. There was myself and I was a health visitor. There was another registered nurse. There was a probation officer and a sister called Seda Sangina, who used to organize the African hair conferences all over. Yeah, indeed. And so we used to do fundraising and organizing around that, which supported the work of the organization. And so that was how I came to get on board in the first place. I mean, unfortunately, that organization came to a traumatic end. As some of the work continued in terms of making sure that daycare institutions and nurseries and places like that had black images, black dolls, policies around the hair and skin care of our children, and so on. So all of that came about not just because of the Association of Black Social Workers and Allied Professionals, because there were other organizations also demanding change along those lines. So, but you see, if you don't demand, well, you won't get anything. So that happened. And then when that organization kind of came to a slow close, I joined an organization in Balham called the Black Action Group, which was providing services to young black people in the community. They had a community housing for young black men, and subsequently built one in Battersea for young women. It was an advisory kind of structure, and I became the secretary for a few years. And at that base, we started a women's group called the Harriet Tubman Sisters, and we used to do political education for women on a Friday evening, weekly. So those are some of the ways and I've gone on since then. So although I had 2 children, you find ways of fitting in that. You can't do everything, obviously, but you can do something.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the main message for me. Everybody has a part to play, no matter how big or small. If everybody's doing something, we don't realize how further along we would be.
Absolutely.
Because it's falling on one person, a couple of people, a handful of people, the work
But
Endless.
we've all seen it. You go out, it's the same people. The elders are there, just the same. The
Well,
elders need to hand over now, in my opinion, to the young people.
yeah,
Because when I was their age, I was already doing this work.
yeah.
I'm now old and retired. Yes, obviously, there are things that I will still do. But I also personally feel that the young people need to get up now and take up this work with a vigor, because we won't be here forever, the older people. And so that legacy has to go on with somebody.
Well, I'm here to tell some of us young people we're not that young. Oh, we're very big people. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. But then you see, if the young children don't see that work being carried on by those that they would see as old people to the
Yeah.
young people, to
Yeah.
children, you're old probably,
Yeah.
whereas, which is the same for when I was young, big people was old. If
Yeah.
they don't see people contributing,
Yeah.
then they won't see it as their responsibility either.
And that's kind of where we're at the moment. There's a
Very
struggle
much so.
and in accountability, and understanding our communal responsibility with each other. I was going to
Indeed.
say, um, with that said, um, we're talking about organizing and be it what type of organizing you did. Now, how did you become a Garveyite?
I suppose it was always there in a small way, because I think well, there's a saying in spirituality that before you're born, you've already agreed
To do that?
your evolution and your destiny.
Yes.
And when you actually come to Earth as a physical being, you've forgotten all of what you've agreed, and your life path and journey takes you through all the challenges and the areas that you will need to go through to come back to an understanding of your role and purpose for being here. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, well, some people, I think, never ever regain that consciousness of what they've agreed to do, because, you know, when you look and you see how little some of the people are willing to do and to take responsibility for assisting with, you think to yourself, well, having said that, that probably then is their divine purpose, because if you've come here to come in touch with your divine purpose, the fact that you didn't obviously means that something has been left out as to why you hadn't reclaimed that work that you need to be doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I hear that. I feel like when I've been asked, you know, when did you become a Garveyite? And I was like, when did I become a Garveyite? I can only say when I've come into a sense of self and coming to liberation, you get to learn. But in terms of the spirit, there's something that's there that's
Indeed.
needed activating. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I agree. And so then this leads me, which you've touched on already, but get a bit more into it. The work of the Black Cross nurses. Why again I wanted to start the show in the month of Messiah was that, you know, I don't think the Black Cross nurses, the work that they have done, gets enough attention, and I think I want to do more work in understanding that work, so I can translate to people that is the work that we're supposed to be building on right now, because they wouldn't have been able to build an organization of such a large number with a level of functionality without implementing programs that was based around stabilizing family and conflict resolution, because we was in a very hostile time. We was in a very a time of rediscovering ourselves and getting to know who we was as Black and African people, and it was a very oppressive time. If we think we're living in an oppressed time now, can you only
Indeed.
imagine what it was then? So, there's a level of upliftment in the work that they was doing. But in that upliftment is about that self-development and that social welfare element. And there was I need to find the lady's name, but she was breaking down how the women was tying together different ways to, I don't know, herbal remedies. So if you're from Haiti or you're from Nigeria, what's the different ways that you do the same thing, but we can translate that from in a pamphlet as to how that can go to the global masses of how we educate our people in these different ways. And then, like you're saying, political education. A lot of us as women, we don't have enough political education to understand what we're fighting, why we are fighting, what we're fighting, and not to be scared of that power, to be fighting for that power. So yeah.
Well, and I think it's also building on, because to be honest, if we look at the Black Cross Nurses was created by Henrietta Vinton Davis. Now, Henrietta Vinton Davis was one of the big time leaders in the UNIA ACL. In fact, Garvey described her as a quintessential Garveyite, which just means that she's way above average. And from a very young age, she was at 15, she was already a teacher in the American system. So you can imagine at a time when, as you described, Sister Nihanda, how hostile the societies were. That was a phenomenal achievement. She worked also in Frederick Douglass's office as the recorder of deed, and a job that was never before given to a Black person. She obviously had a very creative mind. She created the Black Cross Nurses across different parts of the world, where there was branches of the Black Cross Nurses in Haiti, in Belize, across most of the Caribbean areas, in the United States. Because if you people want to go online, or I'm just going to show you this picture of the Black Cross Nurses. This is my poster of women in the Garvey movement, and these are the Black Cross Nurses joining in the marches that the UNIA used to organize. Each year they had an annual convention and a massive march through Harlem. The Black Cross Nurses, the African Motor Corps. She also, Vinton Davis, founded the African Motor Corps, which was a female military wing of the UNIA ACL, and women were taught mechanics and how to defend themselves and how to stand up and defend their communities. Alongside, you've got the male legion that also was responsible for that. So women were being trained to be active participants in the work of the UNIA ACL. And I mean, although they say about 3 million, half of the organization were women, I've read where at least 60% of the organization were women. And I mean, we weren't talking about PR women. We're talking about teachers. We're talking about politicians. We're talking about journalists. I mean, Amy Jakes Garvey herself was a phenomenal writer and a journalist. She had great administrative skills, as did Marcus Garvey's first wife. So those women have really left a phenomenal legacy. But we also have to remember that they, at that time, are who we are now.
Yeah.
It wasn't magic.
Yeah.
People were determined to make a change, to create something within a hostile society that would enable and facilitate growth and development for our people. So they also organized the programs for the juvenile Black Cross Nurses and the other juvenile groups, because the Garvey organization, the UNIA ACL, Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, for those who don't know what UNIACL stands for. They had different divisions, and each division had a lady president and a male president. And so women were organizing amongst themselves, but they were also organizing along with the men, and they were organizing activities and events for the children. So really, we can look back at that because it's, as you read earlier, it's very important for Sankofa to take place. We're looking back to inform ourselves, not informing ourselves to sit down watching somebody's nonsense on the television and so on, to organize ourselves so that we're moving ourselves forward and bring into being the things that we talk about we need to bring into being. Nobody else is going to come and do it.
Nobody else is going to come and do it. What type of character would these women need to have?
Well, they were really powerful. I mean, you know, Amy Jakes used to talk in Garvey and Garveyism, which is this book, for those who might not know, Garvey and Garveyism, which was written by her and was republished in 2014 by the Black Classic Press in Baltimore. She talks about how when she was going to visit Garvey, because she was a very young woman, she was only 26 when she married Garvey, and Garvey was then arrested and charged with the trumped up mail fraud charges and was then in the Tombs prison in Atlanta. And she used to travel miles to go and visit because Atlanta is way down outside New York and those areas where the main offices were in Harlem. She would have a gun in her muff, a muff, like a big gloves. And she was at the ready because at that time they were lynching Black people all over, whether men, women, for no reason whatsoever. So as she said, if anybody attacked her, she was taking a few of them with her. You're talking about women who were not frightened to step forward and take their place in developing an organization for the betterment of their people. So yeah, that's the kind of woman, because even Amy Ashwood, first wife, she went on after the breakup of her marriage with Garvey to create a number of institutions and organizations herself. If you go to number 1 Bassett Road, I think it's NW10, it's just at the far end of Ladbroke Grove, you will see the blue plaque that was established there in 2010 to honor the Afro People's Center that she set up there, where she used to provide accommodation and advice for women, but also for some of our men who had come from the continent and the Caribbean to fight and help these people with their war. So, you have a range of women who are very powerful in their own right. They weren't just coming forward to take up space in the organization. They were coming to build, to develop, and to create change for those that were coming behind them.
So when we got this conversation now around, the Garvey movement, though, was very, what's that word? Patriarchal.
Yes. Yeah,
and,
patriarchal.
And, women was oppressed and they had to fight for their space.
I'll tell you a fact. I'm going to quote you. Now, let me see if I can find it. Where the women had to stand up at one of the conventions and state that they wanted to be able to make their own decisions and to not be dictated to by at the time that we're speaking about. We're speaking about a time when patriarchy was rife.
Yeah.
Women had, let me tell you that it was in 1984. Let me just think on that for a moment. When in this country, a woman, it was during the 80s, let's just say it was during the 80s, when women were able to secure a mortgage in their own right.
Right.
I secured a mortgage. By then, I was divorced to purchase a property. Prior
Wow.
to that, you had to have a
Really?
male guarantor, and you couldn't get anything in your own name.
Mm.
So we're looking now back to the 1920s.
Yeah.
You can imagine that it was the norm.
Yeah.
And, one of the great things about the Garvey movement was that it did recognize the importance of women in leadership roles. And that was promoted by the way the structure was created. So I think when we're looking at things, we look at the whole thing and not just the bit that we like. We look at the good, we look at the bad, because if we don't look at the whole thing, we're not going to make the changes that are required. And I'm trying to find it, but it was one of the conventions where the women said that they wanted to be able to. Oh, here we are. So the lady presidents had responsibility for ensuring that members of the Universal Motor Corps received adequate training in military drills, automotive skills, including driving cars, taxis, and ambulances, which at the time were mostly done by men. So they were demanding this for women in the organization. And a big concern of a number of the women were how their responsibilities were managed, as their leadership roles did not give them the autonomy, but made them always accountable to men in the organization. And a lot of that can be found in this book. Set the World on Fire.
Yeah, I've been reading that in a moment.
And she talks a lot about what happened after Garvey had been deported back to Jamaica, and the way in which many women stepped forward to fill that void that was now created. So, so they wanted the autonomy to lead and challenge the leadership structures and to demand more autonomous leadership positions without male oversight. And in the 1922 UNIA convention in Harlem, they raised a challenge preventing the conference from going ahead because they wanted a new policy that gave them the autonomy to decide how the groups and organizations that they were running would be managed. So it says that women wanted control of the areas that they were responsible for. They wanted women to occupy senior positions on every committee. They wanted women to head up some of the offices and fieldwork sections of the organization, and for women to be given the autonomy to create and formulate plans which would elevate women. They also asked for Henrietta Vinton Davis, a very senior member of the organization, to have the authority to formulate plans for African women all over the world so that they could function in their own right. So just to say, and that doesn't mean it was bad or good. What it means is that we were living in a time when that was how things were. And it's also for men and women to bring the changes that are going to lead to a more balanced structure within our world as a people.
No, I hear that, definitely. I think that's what I was trying to say, that even though that might have been, like I say, in the time, the women still understood the power of their voice.
Indeed.
Still understood that I have a space here and I'm going to create my space here and I'm not going to be pushed out, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And I think that the men understanding that major changes needed to happen for the organization, one, to build, and for us to be able to free ourselves as an African people.
Indeed.
And I think that, again, there's a sense of it speaks to, again, the character of where we was at the time as a people.
Indeed.
In terms of wanting
in fact, just briefly, there's a book called Garvey's work and impact, which was created. I have a copy. I don't see it online much nowadays. It was put together by Rupert Lewis and Patrick Bryan, and it's a compilation of the presentations at the Garvey Centenary Conference, which I attended in 1987 at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. And Professor Tony Martin and also some other women presented on the way in which the Garvey movement shaped a lot of what they called at the time feminist policy, because the Garvey women were very strong within the organization in terms of standing up and demanding the rights that they thought they deserved. So, obviously that's a phenomenal legacy to inherit.
And I think, because of that work, I don't think it's worthwhile. Like you're saying, there's a level of, it's good to be informed with that, but in this day and age, to take that information as a way to negate, the movement as it was regressive, if that makes sense.
I don't think you could ever negate the movement, because if you'd have to be a very dishonest person.
We've got quite a few these days,
because you have to look at how much was achieved. The Negro World newspaper had a woman's page that different women, Madame Demina, Henrietta Vinton Davis, Amy Jakes Garvey, at one time or other was the editor for the women's page, which was titled Our Women and What They Think. So clearly they thought it was really important for women to have their own voice and for them to put forward many of Amy Jakes Garvey's essays were featured in that woman's page, and she called on women to bring forward their views. And to have them written and recorded, and to make their voices heard in terms of the changes that she thought were necessary for us to move forward as a people.
Yeah, definitely. So with that said, I was going to ask where we are at in terms of the fabulous work that the Black Cross nurses did. How important, is it today that we create those welfare systems as solutions to our problems today?
It's very important that we draw on the past to build where we are and to go forward. One of our biggest problems is getting our people collectively to want to do that work. So if you look at people like Auntie Jean and the Saturday school movement, etc., within all of those structures that we currently have today, we are teaching and people are learning from that information. You've got a lot of natural health forums now, even things like skin care, etc. You can get out there and find a lot of natural products and so on. There's also the encouragement on natural diets, trying to eat to live rather than eating to kill yourselves. So it's really about how we get that to the people who, if you like, are not even going to the meetings where they're going to hear any of this, not going to be logging into any of the discussions where these type of things are taking place. I think, as I would say, that work just has to keep on and continuing to sow those seeds wherever we can plant them, so that we can, in the long term, see the change in the mindset of our people.
Where do you think we are as well when it comes to the political education? Do you think there needs to be a lot more work?
It's not that there needs to be more work. Our people really need to wake up. I actually think that where we are now, most of our youngish people, they're just into everything that's going on in the system. They're not organizing. They don't want to come to the meetings. It's usually you're seeing the same people the same older people, the same younger people, the same children, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So that's a big project that needs work. And I don't think it's because people aren't doing the work. It's how it's not being received by our people because of the mental entanglements that we often are involved in.
Definitely. So I was going to ask, in terms of solutions in moving forward, part of mine, we spoke about it briefly. I will be starting my parenting workshop soon. I feel as though for us who have chosen to raise our children in a particular way, there's not enough support networks, let's say, but where we're able to reaffirm the principles that we're saying we're using to raise our children with, and to have those check-ins, if that makes sense, and ways what's the word, keep ourselves in check, so to speak.
Right.
Have an understanding of why we're doing what we're doing, why we decided to raise our children, what is its purpose. It's not black facts, if that makes sense.
Indeed.
I think I personally believe that's my Sankofa in regards to the legacy of the Black Cross nurses, because that was an element of that welfare work, like I said.
Absolutely.
To stabilize family, to have certain levels of conflict resolution.
That's right.
Have understanding of how our families are supposed to function as Black African people, not just as people, if that makes sense. We're very universal in terms of how we're raising our children outside of our cultural context.
Indeed. And everything that we can do to contribute to that is really important, you know.
So what other solutions could we be looking at? Like I say, in the Auntie Jeans market, is it more a case of more women need to be coming together and organizing? In general, are we organizing enough as women? Is there different, or should we just be finding organizations that's doing the work and just tapping in where we can? And like you're saying, finding that time.
I think that the second point you've raised there is probably going to be the most important in terms of supporting existing organizations that are doing this work. Because if you look from the time you came on board, as you've said, if you look back, you'll see so many little splinters spring up here, the next minute they're gone, spring up here, the next minute. And yet there's the institutions that have been there a long time, needing more members, needing more support, you know, financial support, physical, bodily support, etc. And we can't keep splintering. If we're going to build anything of substance, then we really need to be working collectively where we can to build something of substance. Because I try to look quite critically, not just to look with the passion. We have to be very critical sometimes also of what it is we're doing out there. You know, sometimes I'm just speechless because I used to think I knew the answers. And now I've come to recognize that even when you know the answers, it doesn't follow that our people are going to take them and run with them and implement them.
I think definitely in my time, and the reason why I think, why I'm doing the workshops, but also why this show exists, is because I think one of the biggest things is conflict resolution. How we connect, and how far we get to in terms of our internal work, if that makes sense. So there's an outward work in terms of output, the function, the delivering of the presentations, the event, the helping out with the event, whatever your physical contribution is.
Indeed.
But when it comes to that person said this to me, that person spoke to me in this manner, that person, whatever that dynamic, whatever in that dynamic, we struggle to have productive, functional conversation.
Absolutely.
And be accountable. If we know, it's like we lose all ability of what is right and wrong.
Indeed, absolutely. And in fact, I mean, that is something that permeates even some of the so-called people who know exactly what it is they're trying to teach.
100%.
And I think a big part of that is when you don't focus on knowledge of self, you see everything external. But, in Ayanna Van Zant's book, Acts of Faith, one of the little sayings that she has in there is, when you recognize things that you're seeing in other people, you should be looking within yourself, because you wouldn't recognize it as bad or dysfunctional in them if you didn't have that trait or whatever it is within yourself. So it's about coming to terms with our own failings and recognizing that when we're critiquing, don't just critique the outside people, critique yourself as well. Because if you can sort yourself out, when, let's say, the person says something, you'll react in a different way, because your knowledge of self will enable you to do that.
Definitely. And I think there's an element that the UNIA, the Women of the Garvey movement, there's something that is yet to be discovered that they tapped into. And like I said, I think it's also, there was a collective consciousness that
Indeed
was humble to the process of we're trying to build for the betterment of ourselves. Whereas now we're in a time that collective humility, let's say, is not there.
Absolutely. And it's every man for himself, and God, the fictitious God for us all, which it's not going to take us anywhere, really. That kind of selfishness is just not going to cut it, because we can see it
with our children.
We're seeing the consequences of it.
Yeah. And a lot of us think that, well, not my child. A lot of the children that's, being taken, let's say, they're children that are, let's say, wayward children. And a lot of the time, it's a 50-50. Some of these children are just wrong time, wrong place. But we're not thinking about the socializing of our children, because our children have to socialize.
Absolutely.
But nobody takes charge of how our children are socializing. Nobody wants to take in other people's children.
Indeed.
In types of ways. So I'm trying to have more conversations with people like yourself, to have an understanding of what type of character are we trying to develop, what type, like you're saying, how deep does the level of self-reflection need to be for the work to manifest in the way it needs to? Does that make sense?
Well, I think one of the great important things is, I mean, if each person, parents, collectively work on themselves and their child, and then the next person does similar. The problem is that's not what happens. You've got if you like, a handful of people, or a smaller percentage of people, trying to teach the right ways, the ways to respond to conflict, teaching the ways to behave in different situations to children. And then you've got maybe some of the friends they're with, some of the family members even, who don't business. So it's a big job that is facing our community. But that doesn't mean that we don't do nothing.
And I think that's the other thing, that the work is plenty. And so I can understand the feeling of overwhelmed, but again, I don't understand that the answer is we do nothing.
Indeed.
Sense.
Indeed.
The more we engage, the more fruits will come back.
Absolutely.
And I think I was going to ask you in terms of how would you say having the life of an organizer, being on Liberation Road, how has that shaped you as a mother, as a woman, as a sister, auntie? How is those things? How has your journey on Liberation Road thus far shaped you?
Okay, well, in fact, one of the things that I've always tried to do is to work with mostly with other sisters, but men also in groups. So when we had the Universal African Peoples Development Association, that was in the late 80s, early 90s, we used to organize political education at the Albrighton Community Centre in Dulwich. And that time we were working with Brother Leader and the Alkebula and Revivalist movement. We would share that work. So it's really, for me, about pulling together. I think pulling together as a people is really important. Supporting where you can. Some of my friends who are now older than me, who I used to organize with in the community, they've got dementia and things like that. It's about not forgetting about them and never visiting them and even sitting and reading with them so that you're reminding them of they may not even understand what you're talking about, but who knows if they're not understanding. So just being a communal person where you can, I think that's really, really important. Supporting your family as best you can. But also not being afraid to correct them where they're doing the wrong thing. They may not see it as the wrong thing. And, oftentimes you tell off people and begs with you for long and stop talk to you. But, that is something that we sometimes have to do. I have a brother who he's passed on now, but he would always be giving me a bad name simply because he was very out to order to his wife. And whenever if I was there and I would tell him, no, you can't behave like that. We didn't grow up. And I would say to her, don't allow him to speak to you like that or to treat you like that in front of him. So it begs because I'm his sister. So I collude with him. Well, I don't agree with that kind of behavior because I don't think it serves any useful purpose in terms of building. When children see their parents behaving in that manner, we have nothing to say when they start on the same road. So, my mum always used to say, show me your company and I'll tell you who you are. So these things are important. We need to know that our behavior tells the world who we are. So I would like to think that I feel well respected in the community.
Absolutely.
I get a lot of accolade from the community, and I'm attributing that to the way that I have lived in the community.
Absolutely. And the last thing I was going to say was, as much as we're talking about being a communal person, what is how do we do self-preservation though as well?
Well, that's important in terms of taking time out for yourself, treating yourself to some of the things that you would like for yourself specifically. Taking time to maybe have a massage, go for a swim. What are the things that you really make you feel good about yourself and in the world? Family dinners. We try monthly to have a family dinner.
Yes.
When it's birthdays, we try to go out together or have a picnic together. So it's about taking time for yourself as well. We're not just here to give away all our life and our time.
Yeah.
We're important spirits on this journey, and we have to find time to nourish and invigorate ourselves as well.
And then what about self-preservation in regards to bad character? So, you're doing the work with people and, metaphorically you get bucks. You get bucks again. How many slaps are we supposed to take?
Well, you're not supposed to take any slap from any, in terms of whether it's bad language or abuse or whatever. You're not, in my opinion, you're not here to take anybody's abuse or bad. And that applies to collectively everybody. Nobody has a right to be bad-mouthing people. For me, what's important is, let's say, for example, I see you or anybody in the community behaving in a way that I think is inappropriate. I'll come over and just say to the person, "Excuse me a minute, could I have a word?" And then, I probably would approach them with you may not have noticed this, but I have seen it more than once, and I'm not going to be here to tell you of, but it perhaps is something that you might want to look at and reflect on, rather than me going to tell somebody else, "You see that sister, why? Or that brother, why?" No. How will they ever change or know that they're even doing something that's not right if we're all in collusion with it and we say nothing?
Absolutely.
And this is one of the big failings in our community. Often we see people behaving in a way. Unfortunately, it's also very difficult to get them to stop. You're trying to calm them down and encourage them to just leave the thing, and then going on even worse. But I think the more we talk about it and bring it out into the open, the more we would hope it will cause people to do a bit of reflective practice. Is what they're saying about me true? Did I actually do that? Is that how I come across? Because oftentimes, all of us, I'm sure I've got some of the failings that everybody has. Some of the times we don't actually critique ourselves. So it's really important, if something keeps happening over and over, it's time to look at it and to examine, well, why is this happening? How can it be resolved? Is it even true? If it's not true, you push it to one side. But in reflection, you may see something.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Mama. I know you are a woman as well of poetry, creativity. I'd like for you to leave us with one of your powerful poems.
Okay, so we'll go back and I'll start it from the beginning. It's called, in fact, it was when I launched the book in Jamaica on CVM TV.
Oh, wow.
It was it was a poem that I read to start the, it was a 10-minute slot to launch my book. And after I'd finished it, I could hear the people in the recording room bigging it up and, really shouting some praise. So, the incomparable Black woman. Is there any other race of people on this planet who can expect such leadership, dedication, and strength from their women? Black people have much to thank Black women for. Black women, the strong, confident ones, the quiet, unassuming ones, the women who are always there for the race, the women who are always there, working hard, giving their all, being mother and sometimes father, being everything to our community. The Black woman, mother of creation, strong, oh so strong Black woman. What is so very sad is that many Black men fear her strength, fear her strong spirit, and fail to love, honor, and protect her. The Black woman, mother, daughter, wife, sister, aunt, grandmother. Black woman, mother of all creation. Black woman, the original guardian angel. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks. And can you show the book again? What's the book called?
This is Women in the Garvey Movement by Nzinga Assata. And I've shown you Garvey and Garveyism by the Black Classic Press. I think Brother Emmanuel and Brother Pepperkai have stocks of that. and then Set the World on Fire by Keisha N. Blaine. That can be found online. I've got masses of books I could tell you about, but
I appreciate you so much today, Mama Nzinga, for joining and blessing my show.
You're welcome.
I feel full with the knowledge and the wisdom that you have given us today. And we'll definitely be continuing this conversation in different ways, especially around your work with other organizations and welfare work as well, a bit more in depth with that. But we just wanted to touch on the women of the Garvey movement and understanding their powerful warrior spirit that we are standing with. So now I give thanks for you this evening.
You're welcome.
And I will let you have a good evening while I
thank you. And you have a good evening too. And blessings to you and your family.
Give thanks.
Wonderful. All the best now. Bye-bye.
That was Mama Nzinga. Thank you very much for tuning into my first show here on Kimbunga Media. Very excited to be part of the Kimbunga family. Look forward to many more shows. We've got much more coming up. I'll be interviewing lots of different people that I do work with. Got some young people coming through on my fruits. And some of the warrior queen mothers that I work and organize with, but also that do powerful work in the community. This is not just about sisters, even though I am Sister Sankofa Rising. I'll be speaking to some powerful warrior kings that do work in our community and do that welfare work as well. I look forward to speaking with you all and hearing all your questions, comments, and thoughts. Share, like, subscribe, and see you soon.